Behave yourself, man!
To dissect the potential impact of Brexit on the capital, I have here MPs on opposing sides. For Remain, Neil Coyle, Labour MP for Bermondsey and Old Southwark, and Andrew Rossendale, who's the Conservative MP for Romford and who wanted very much for Out. Welcome to you both. And what we're going to do first off is hear from Neil and Andrew, but not in the studio. They've been reflecting on the future for their constituents, each reporting from their own patch on Wednesday, the day the process was triggered.
Welcome to Romford and to Margaret Thatcher House. This was the heart of our campaign last June as Romford and Havering voted 70% to leave the European Union. There's a feeling of contentment that we're back in the driving seat, and that's why people around here voted to leave. It wasn't just about immigration, it was actually, I think, more about sovereignty.
We don't like being told what to do in this part of London.
With ourselves and the Tories and UKIP, we all worked together in Havering to make this possible, and we did all work together.
Members of 6 political parties here in this borough worked together to achieve that great victory, and so this week it is a fantastic celebration, not only for what we achieved here in Havering, but for the great decision of the British people to take back control of our country and to leave the European Union.
I'm just ecstatic. It's a wonderful day to celebrate a wonderful occasion.
So this week we celebrate the triggering of Article 50, the beginning of the restoration of our freedom as a nation, the right of the British people to make their own decisions about their own country.
As a Labour MP, I am sickened to see people celebrate the uncertainty caused by Theresa May's actions this week. In Bermondsey and Old Southwark, many businesses have been in touch with me to outline their concerns about leaving the European Union.
I think the biggest issue is the uncertainty of it all. We just literally don't know. We seem to be going into this whole new arena, and the traders that talk to me say, so what's going to happen next, Aaron? What is going to be the restrictions on what we can do?
So we're here at Brindisa, Borough Margaret Brindisa is a Spanish food specialist, contributing to the vibrant, creative food and drink sector we have, and we all enjoy in the UK, but a sector that's very worried about the falling pound.
Prices have already increased. Further devaluation of the pound would obviously threaten that as well. I think we will have to look at other costs that might come into play, such as legislation.
The impact goes far, far beyond just businesses. So universities losing access to EU research funding and international students. British students could pay more because of leaving the European Union. The health and social care sector in crisis but reliant on non-UK EU nationals. The government needs to get real and stop being dishonest with British people.
Well, let's pick up on some of this. I mean, Neil, are you going to be able to find any kind of peace with this arrangement? It's happening now.
It is happening, but as I said in the piece, the government is not being honest with people about the costs and consequences of what is happening and the dangers and risks ahead of not having a deal in place in 2 years. And to see the UK government using security as a bargaining chip in these negotiations is frankly sickening. The idea that we wouldn't support another French or German government, whoever it might be, to avoid a terrorist atrocity is just frankly
We'll come
sickening.
on to security a little bit later, and we have an expert joining us. But, you know, the wider point, not being honest, what do you say?
Oh, well, I don't know where Neil's getting this from. The Prime Minister's made it very clear that we're going to get the best possible agreement with our friends, our neighbours on the continent. That means trade, cooperation, and it means security. Look, most countries in the world have sensible bilateral arrangements. We're just as capable of having a sensible arrangement with Europe as Canada is with America. What we're not going to be part of, and what the British people voted clearly against, is to be in a political union, a straitjacket. We're getting out of that. It doesn't mean we can't still work with our friends on the continent and have sensible bilateral cooperation.
Celebration there, there's like a celebration there, but I mean, what thought do you give to the majority, the very big majority in your capital city that don't agree with you?
Well, I think, again, we have to look to the future. The decision's been made. The British people voted to leave the EU. Parliament voted overwhelmingly. I don't think Neil did, but I think most of us who respect democracy voted overwhelmingly in Parliament to invoke Article 50 and give the Prime Minister the ability to get on with the job and get the best possible arrangements for all the people of the United Kingdom.
And the important thing now is surely to rally round and ensure there is a confident negotiating position from a united British government.
But this, Andrew has more waffle than Belgium. This is, the idea that this is a vote against a political union when you've seen businesses who are saying they don't know if they'll be able to recruit. They don't know what their costs of exporting will be. They don't know what the cost of importing will be. They've seen the drop in the pound already, damaging their business, damaging their ability to invest in further jobs. People are losing their jobs right now as a result of what's going on, and to see people celebrating is offensive.
So you make it sound as if the economy has bombed. We know it hasn't.
Well, in my constituency, I can tell you with businesses who haven't expanded in the way they intended. I can tell you that the financial sector is moving jobs out of London. The biscuit factory in Wigan, Rivington Biscuits, closed, blaming and EasyJet relocating. These are happening. The idea that the economy has gone on as before is simply not true.
As you enjoy your Italian prosecco, was it? Incidentally, it probably was, wasn't it? As you enjoy your prosecco, though, will you spare what thought will you give to the possibility? Will you not be looking for the signs, or will you be in utter denial if businesses in your area start going belly up?
But Tim, there's a misunderstanding here. I want sovereignty restored to the British people. Of course, any political change, anything like this, you can have a Jeremy Corbyn government, there'd be a big drop in the pound then. Anything like that can actually affect the economy. But we need to adjust. It's an adjustment. Once we've adjusted, and there may be ups and downs, there'll be bumps in the road. Yes, the pound has fallen, but I think that was necessary. The pound was overvalued. Long term, it's in our interests to take back control of our economic self-governance.
Hang on a second, let's move on that word, take back control. Let's turn to immigration. I mean, what should happen to immigration levels in the capital? On his way back from Paris this week, this is what the Mayor Sadiq Khan told me.
London voted to remain in the EU. We want talent and we need talent.
You say you want it. We've been getting 30,000 odd Europeans in every year over the last 10 years. Do you want to see that figure go up or go down?
I want to make sure we can meet the needs of London. That means obviously skilling up Londoners to have these skills for the jobs that we create in construction or tech or finance or services, but also recognising that one of the reasons why we are the greatest city in the world is our ability to attract talent.
But those industries are all saying they want more people, so are you happy for that number to go up above 30,000 a year that are coming in?
I want what we need. Let me give you one simple example.
So you'd be happy for it to go up?
I'll give you one simple example around construction. We have, roughly speaking, 300,000 construction workers in London. Half of those are born in the UK. Of those half, between 10 and 20% are going to retire within 5 years. Even if we were to skill up our youngsters to have these jobs in construction, we can't fill those vacancies.
But then you are happy for the immigration level in London to go up each year from now on?
No, what I'm saying is that
you are or you aren't?
We've got to have a flexible immigration system that recognises London's needs, not just in construction, but in tech, in culture, in finance and other sectors as well.
But do you understand that people will have less confidence on whether you're going to, provide a decent deal if you won't say whether you want more or less immigration?
No, they won't, because they voted to remain in the EU, because they recognise the contribution talent makes to our city. We've got 1 million Londoners, for example, they're Londoners who are EU citizens, contributing hugely to our economy.
Andrew, I mean, you said something about it in the film, but I mean, people, if you're honest, voted a lot on immigration in Havering, didn't they?
Well, I think that the idea that Britain can't control its immigration policy, yes, they didn't like that idea. They wanted to see an immigration policy which is sensible, beneficial to Britain, welcomes people that are here to work, but not one that actually gives preferential treatment to European citizens, while, for instance, Commonwealth citizens are prevented from coming here.
You could argue,
so
you could argue you need them both, but those constituents are economically illiterate, aren't they? If you listen to the Mayor and believe the Mayor, because you absolutely need these workers.
Of course you need immigration. This country has always had immigration, but we've given up control of how we manage that immigration policy by being in the EU. That's going to change. We're bringing back control of our immigration policy and our borders, and that's what the British people want.
And you talk about the fairness, so you would have a system now where you treated EU residents exactly the same as non-EU.
You need a fair system, and everyone is treated on their merit, not on their nationality, but what they can contribute to the country. They should have a fair and equal system.
Leaving all those skill shortages and areas from construction to cleaning our hospitals where you just haven't got the staff, the capital collapses.
We may well need those sort of people. Of course we do. We've always needed that kind of immigration. I don't see that stopping. What it means is if you're coming into work in the United Kingdom, then you have to go through the same process. So an Austrian has to go through the same process as an Australian. Why is that unfair?
The Mayor of London seems just to have that difficulty about saying whether he wouldn't mind it going up if that's what happened and the economy expanded and you needed that. What do you say?
Well, I think the idea that we need some kind of artificial number is nonsense. What Sadiq is saying, and the poll showed that the vast majority of Londoners back his agenda for London and the support he's offering to businesses, is that if we need people to come in to actually take on jobs that are available, then why would we want to stop that? Why would we want to stop people coming, paying and contributing? And the idea that we're taking back control somehow is utter guff and nonsense. The government has the right to remove people from EU countries who are here after 3 months if they're not working and not able to support themselves. They haven't done it. It's a dishonesty, it's a fraud on the British
It's a figure one
public.
say about 300,000 EU citizens have come over here over the last 10 years and stayed. Are you happy for that annual figure, or over the next 10 years, it to be more than 300,000? Are you happy if we need it for immigration to go up?
My concern with the number is around the pressure on public services. And when people talk about immigration in the context of the referendum, we need to factor in the fact that it became a proxy because the Conservatives and the Lib Dems before squeezed public services, didn't invest in housing. That pressure on services is what
if you get investment in public services, would you then say it's okay for them to go up?
Because if it's linked to taking on jobs and contributing to our economy, why would we not want to welcome that?
OK. Let's move on. Among the areas where the Mayor expressed particular concern during his 3 days in Europe was security cooperation. Tanjil Rashid has more.
That's our man in Brussels, formally notifying the EU of Britain's decision to leave. But who else was in town this week? The Mayor of London on his European tour, cut short after last week's terror attacks. He was meeting with the mayors of Paris and Brussels, both cities also targeted in recent years by terrorists. Their message was one of solidarity.
We are together, we will face together the crisis situation that happened in Brussels last year and in London this year.
Sadiq Khan emphasised the EU's contribution to the capital's safety.
It's made us safer through cross-border policing, European arrest warrant, intelligence sharing and much, much more.
These may now be up for renegotiation. But after meeting with the EU Security Commissioner, Mr Khan stressed the need for continuity.
It's in nobody's interest for us to have less good links with our European partners after Brexit in relation to security in particular.
Brexiters disagree that leaving the EU could make us less safe.
Our intelligence gathering abilities, a lot of our security expertise, we're doing that on a bilateral basis, most of that. We're doing it with other European partners, but not within a European Union structure.
In her letter to the EU, the Prime Minister mentioned security 11 times, calling for a special partnership that takes in both economic and security cooperation, something she stressed to MPs this week.
With Europe's security more fragile today than at any time since the end of the Cold War, weakening our cooperation and failing to stand up for European values would be a costly mistake.
Some are saying that sounds like a threat.
Well, we're joined now by Professor Malcolm Chalmers from the Royal United Services Institute. Welcome to you. Before we get onto that, whether it was or not, it sounded like a threat to you. Just, in a nutshell, has being part of the EU enhanced unequivocally our security and security cooperation between nations?
I think it has. I think there's both the more technical level, the police and intelligence cooperation, an element of which is governed by EU-wide agreements, much of which is not, and we will have to look at how that's continued after Brexit. There's also, I think, the broader foreign security policy arrangements, for example, agreeing EU sanctions against Russia or Iran or whoever it might be. And that's a mechanism which we'll have to redevelop in some other form once we leave the European Union.
Can you participate fully? Can you do a good job of countering terrorism and providing security when you're outside of the EU, do you think?
I certainly think it's possible.
How easy then?
The United States and the European Union have many agreements, legally binding agreements in a number of areas, not least in data sharing, which is absolutely critical in terms of intelligence. Once we're outside the European Union, we will have to develop something of that sort in order to replicate the benefits that the United States or other major powers have.
Absolutely. Nick Clegg, former Deputy Prime Minister, said this week that you'd be losing access to Schengen systems and data, information systems, absolutely crucial. He said, is that absolutely crucial? Does that totally imperil our ability to protect ourselves?
As the Prime Minister made clear in the Article 50 letter, in the absence of any agreement on security cooperation after Brexit, there would be real risks, and therefore it's very important for our security and the security of our neighbours that we reach such an agreement before we withdraw from existing agreements.
Did you think it sounded like a threat, what she said today, and the coupling together of that with a trade deal?
I think I was struck by how important security was in our letter and how relatively unimportant it was in the reply from the European Council. In the European reply, the main emphasis was on trade and regulation. Security and counter-terrorism was mentioned, but in the Article 50 letter from the UK, as your report suggests, security was mentioned 11 times. There was considerable reference to the increased danger since the end of the Cold War, and security was almost put on a par with economics. Now, I don't think there was a direct threat made, but implicit in it was that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed.
We always deal in simplicities, I'm afraid, on this programme. But, if you had to answer whether this made things more difficult, though, being outside, what would you say when we talk about whether or not it was a threat? Would we suffer, or would the EU suffer more from us picking up, taking away our information, our own intelligence, our own policing abilities?
No, I think we would both suffer. Terrorism, organised crime, cybercrime are all international phenomena which we have to tackle through international cooperation, most of all with our neighbours, but actually also globally. And it doesn't make any sense to make a calculation as to whether you increase the probability of a terrorist attack in Paris more than the probability of a terrorist attack in London. It's an absolutely shared concern which we have to tackle together.
Neil Coyle, you said right at the beginning of the programme that you thought this was what you shouldn't be using as a bargain chip. What she's doing is just stating a reality. If you want to treat the UK properly and seriously, you'll provide them with a sensible trade deal. Otherwise, things like security will suffer. It's inevitable.
Well, I think we've had the government talk about British people living in other EU countries and EU citizens living here as bargaining chips, and now we're seeing the government try to lever in that implicit threat of security being, the trade deal being contingent on what we share in terms of security. I think it's an utterly despicable gesture by the government.
A very slow turn. We wait for your response.
It's just incredible what Neil has just said. Actually, if you look at what the United Kingdom contributes to the security and defence of Europe, it is more than any other country, and that's going to continue. We are a responsible nation. We want to work with our allies and our partners within the EU, via NATO, but as Gisela Stewart said earlier, most of it's bilateral. Very little is actually via the EU, and I think most countries have bilateral agreements on these things, and we will have the same.
But it's irresponsible to throw this into the mix and suggest we might not cooperate on security if we don't get the trade deal.
Mrs May has not
What about the wider issue about whether we're going to be any less safe, though, in 2 years' time?
And I think, we should recognise the police and security services in this country do an absolutely incredible job at tackling domestic homegrown terrorism of the kind we saw, sadly, in London last week. But the idea that we wouldn't want to share intelligence and prevent attacks like that in other cities...
That is not what the Prime Minister is saying. The Prime Minister is highlighting the importance of getting security arrangements, bilateral agreements in place. She's actually emphasising the importance of this. the EU is almost taking it all for granted, and I don't think they should. I think we need to work together with our European friends to make sure that all people of Europe are safe and secure.
But that's the point, isn't it? You're saying they shouldn't take for granted that we share intelligence on threats to them or them sharing threats with us. And I find that utterly, if we are to defeat terrorists, if we are to prevent attacks, we must work together, whatever the trade deal is. That should be the bottom line.
Malcolm, just a final one. The European arrest warrant, which we've heard a lot about. So we come out of that unless we negotiate a continuation. But how important has it been? Do you think we can just get a kind of exactly the same arrangement afterwards?
I think it's possible to get the same arrangement. I think the point here is that all these are about the rule of law. They're about legally binding agreements which strike the right balance between the rights of the individual and the responsibilities of the state.
Currently supervised, given you mentioned that, by the European Court of Justice.
And cybersecurity is another example where the European Union regulations play a central role in how we guide our firms in the UK to operate. Now, you can have new legal arrangements, but it's not simply a case of ad hoc bilateral cooperation after Brexit. You actually have to have laws in place to govern that relationship.
Boy, for sure it's going to be a tricky process. I hope you're available. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. Now for the rest of the political news in 60 seconds.
The firm which operates the Hong Kong Metro has been awarded the franchise to run South West trains for 7 years. The Department for Transport said the new operators would oversee a £1.2 billion investment to improve journeys for millions of train passengers. A 6-year cost-cutting partnership between Westminster, Kensington and Chelsea and Hammersmith and Fulham boroughs to share some services has collapsed. Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea authorities accuse Hammersmith and Fulham of appearing to make alternative in-house plans without any formal engagement with the other two local authority partners about key services. About 200 couriers are threatening legal action against the takeaway food delivery company Deliveroo, claiming that they are employees and entitled to the appropriate rights. Deliveroo claims that delivery riders are self-employed contractors and not entitled to basic employment rights.
But on this Brexit-focused programme, Neil Coyle, what now needs to happen over the next 2 years? What are you watching for?
Well, my start point is I prefer us not to be leaving the European Union. But what the government needs to do is stop deceiving and committing this fraud on British people and outline the dangers and costs that we face. So, British students pay more to go to universities because universities don't have European funding or international student numbers. Which hospitals do you want to close, or which social care service do you want to stop serving people because they can't recruit? What farms don't you want to be operating? What are you going to say to the car manufacturers who face extra costs of exporting? What do you say to businesses who want to recruit? What do you say to hotels who are reliant on non-UK EU nationals?
In about 35 seconds, you've got hospitals. I'm going to tick them off. You've got to address them all.
I think Neil needs to cheer up, frankly. We've got a great future ahead of our great United Kingdom. As long as people like Neil and others stop the remoaning, accept the will of the British people, let's trade globally, let's make our own laws, let's work with our friends, our neighbours, let's support businesses and give them the opportunities to be successful and to flourish. If we go on and on about being unhappy about leaving, we're never going to solve this.
OK. To both of you, thanks very much indeed for doing that with us this week.